If you're a green card holder or visa holder, one mistake from 10, 20, even 30 years ago could soon get you deported overnight. There's a real bill in Congress right now that would make a single DUI enough to destroy your life in America. Before this becomes law, you need to hear this. If you're a green card holder, visa holder, or any non-citizen living in the United States, what I'm about to share with you could fundamentally change how you think about your future in America. There's a bill sitting in the Senate right now that has immigration attorneys, advocacy groups, and millions of immigrant families watching very closely. This isn't about spreading fear. This is about being informed and prepared. By the end of this video, you'll understand exactly what House Resolution 875 is, where it stands right now, what could happen in January 2026, and most importantly, what steps you should consider taking to protect yourself and your family. Welcome back to US Move and Money. Before we begin, I want to be crystal clear about something. The information I'm sharing today is based on a bill that has passed the House of Representatives, but is not yet law. It must still pass the Senate and be signed by the president before it affects anyone. However, given the momentum behind this bill and the political climate we're in, it's crucial that every non-citizen understands what's being proposed and what it could mean for them. Today, we're talking about H.R. 875, officially called the Jeremy and Angel C. and Sergeant Brandon Mendoza Protect Our Communities from DUIs Act of 2025. This bill was introduced by Representative Barry Moore from Alabama, and it passed the House on June 26, 2025, with a vote of 246 to 160. That's a significant majority, showing bipartisan support from both Republican and Democratic representatives. The bill is now sitting with the Senate Judiciary Committee. And as we move into January 2026, many experts believe we could see movement on this legislation. At its core, H.R. 875 aims to amend the Immigration and Nationality Act to make driving under the influence of alcohol or drugs a ground for both inadmissibility and deportability for non-citizens. If you're not familiar with immigration law terminology, let me explain what these terms mean. Inadmissibility means that a person can be denied entry into the United States. This applies not just to people trying to enter for the first time, but also to lawful permanent residents who travel abroad and try to return. If you're deemed inadmissible, you can be stopped at the border and denied re-entry even if you have a valid green card. Deportability means that a person who is already living in the United States can be removed from the country. Here's what makes this bill so significant. Under current law, a single misdemeanor DUI is generally not enough to get someone deported or denied entry. Immigration authorities typically look for aggravating factors such as multiple DUI convictions, driving without a license, causing serious injury, or other circumstances that elevate the severity of the offense. But H.R. 875 would change all of that. If this bill becomes law, any non-citizen who has been convicted of a DUI or who even admits to committing the essential elements of a DUI offense could face immediate deportation proceedings or be barred from entering the United States. This includes people who simply admit to driving under the influence even if they were never formally convicted in court. The bill specifically states that these provisions would apply without regard to how the underlying jurisdiction classifies the offense. What this means is that it doesn't matter whether your state treats a DUI as a misdemeanor, a traffic violation, or something else. It doesn't matter if you completed a diversion program, paid your fines, or had the charge reduced. Under federal immigration law, as H.R. 875 would amend it, any DUI would be treated the same way as a deportable offense. This bill would impact all non-citizens, which is a very broad category. This includes green card holders, also known as lawful permanent residents, even those who have lived in the United States for decades. It includes people on temporary work visas, such as H-1B, L-1, or TN visas. It affects international students on F-1 visas, people on tourist or visitor visas, DACA recipients, asylum seekers and refugees, and anyone else who is not a United States citizen. One of the most concerning aspects of this bill is that it doesn't include any temporal limitations. This means that even if you had a DUI conviction 10, 20, or 30 years ago, it could still be used as grounds for deportation or inadmissibility if H.R. 875 becomes law. Immigration law often allows for retroactive application of new regulations, which means that people who were not considered deportable yesterday could suddenly find themselves in deportation proceedings tomorrow. The bill also doesn't provide for any discretionary waivers. The language is absolute. If you have a DUI conviction or admission, you are deportable. After passing the House on June 26, 2025, H.R. 875 was sent to the Senate on June 27, 2025. It was read twice and referred to the Senate Judiciary Committee. As of today, the bill is still sitting in that committee. For a bill to become law, it must pass both the House and the Senate in identical form and then be signed by the President. The Senate Judiciary Committee is responsible for reviewing the bill, potentially holding hearings, and deciding whether to report it to the full Senate for a vote. Historically, many bills die in committee and never make it to a full Senate vote. However, several factors suggest that H.R. 875 could be different. First, the White House has publicly endorsed this bill. According to official statements, the administration supports H.R. 875 as a measure to enhance public safety and hold non-citizens to a strict standard when it comes to dangerous driving. This executive support adds significant political momentum to the bill's prospects. Second, the bill received substantial bipartisan support in the House. While it was introduced by a Republican and had mostly Republican co-sponsors, the final vote of 246 to 160 indicates that some Democrats also voted in favor. This bipartisan backing could make it easier for the bill to advance in the Senate. Third, immigration enforcement has been a major priority for the current administration, and H.R. 875 fits squarely within this broader policy agenda. Here's my prediction for January 2026. I believe there's a moderate to high likelihood that the Senate Judiciary Committee will take action on this bill in the coming weeks. January is typically a busy time for Congress, especially with a new session beginning. Committee chairs often use the early months of the year to move priority legislation. Given the White House support and the public safety framing of this bill, I wouldn't be surprised to see hearings scheduled in January or February 2026. However, predicting Senate action is always challenging because individual senators have more power to slow down or block legislation through procedural means. Some legal experts and immigration attorneys believe that if the Senate is going to pass H.R. 875, it might be attached to a larger piece of legislation rather than being voted on as a standalone bill. This is a common legislative tactic. For example, if there's a must-pass spending bill or a broader immigration reform package, H.R. 875 could be included as one component. This would make it harder for opponents to block it and could speed up its passage. If the bill does pass the Senate and get signed into law, it would take effect immediately upon enactment. Once the president signs the bill, it becomes law and immigration authorities could begin applying it right away. Let me walk you through some real-world scenarios to help you understand the implications. Imagine Maria, who came to the United States from Mexico in 1995. She became a lawful permanent resident in 2000. She's married to a U.S. citizen, has 3 children who were born here, owns a home, and works as a nurse. In 2010, Maria made a mistake. She went to a friend's birthday party, had 2 glasses of wine, and decided to drive home. She was pulled over at a DUI checkpoint and arrested. She pleaded guilty to a misdemeanor DUI, paid her fines, completed an alcohol education program, and never had any other legal problems. For the past 15 years, Maria has lived her life without any immigration concerns related to that DUI. She's renewed her green card twice without issues and traveled internationally without problems. Under current immigration law, her single misdemeanor DUI from 15 years ago is not a significant immigration issue. But if H.R. 875 becomes law, everything changes. If Maria travels outside the United States and tries to return, she could be stopped at the border and deemed inadmissible because of that 2010 DUI conviction. Even without traveling, she could receive a notice to appear in immigration court where the government would seek to deport her based on that same conviction. Consider Raj, who is in the United States on an H-1B work visa. He's a software engineer at a tech company and has been here for 3 years. His employer has started the green card sponsorship process for him. Last year, Raj was at a company happy hour. He had a beer, thought he was fine to drive, but was pulled over for a minor traffic violation. The officer suspected DUI and asked Raj to perform field sobriety tests. Raj didn't perform well on the tests, though his blood alcohol content was just barely over the legal limit. Raj was arrested and charged with DUI. His attorney was able to negotiate a plea deal where Raj entered a diversion program. If he successfully completes the program, the charge will be dismissed and won't appear as a conviction on his record. Under current immigration law, Raj would likely still be okay, but under H.R. 875, the situation could be very different. Remember, the bill applies not just to convictions, but also to admissions of the essential elements of the offense. During his arrest, if Raj acknowledged to the police officer that he had consumed alcohol before driving, or if he made any statements that could be interpreted as an admission, he could face inadmissibility or deportability issues, even if he's never formally convicted. Think about Carlos, who was brought to the United States by his parents when he was 5 years old. He's now 28, has DACA status, and works as a teacher. Carlos has lived virtually his entire life in the United States. Last month, Carlos was driving home from a friend's house after watching a football game. He had 2 beers over the course of 4 hours, and he genuinely believed he was sober enough to drive. Unfortunately, he was pulled over for having a broken tail light, and the officer smelled alcohol on his breath. Carlos was arrested for DUI. Under current regulations, a DUI could potentially affect Carlos's DACA renewal, but the determination would be made on a case-by-case basis. But if H.R. 875 becomes law, Carlos would almost certainly lose any chance of regularizing his immigration status. The bill would make him inadmissible, which means he couldn't adjust his status even if Congress were to pass legislation creating a pathway to citizenship for dreamers. It's important to understand that H.R. 875 is controversial, and there are strong arguments on both sides of this debate. Supporters of this bill, including many members of Congress and the current administration, frame it as a common-sense public safety measure. They argue that driving under the influence is an incredibly dangerous behavior that puts innocent lives at risk. The bill is named after real victims who were all killed by drunk drivers. Supporters argue that the United States has every right to set high standards for non-citizens who want to live here, and that protecting American lives should be the top priority. They contend that if someone makes the choice to drive under the influence, they're demonstrating a disregard for the safety and well-being of others. Opponents of the bill, including immigration attorneys, civil rights organizations, and advocacy groups, have raised serious concerns about its fairness and proportionality. First, they argue that the bill treats a misdemeanor offense as if it were equivalent to serious violent crimes. In the criminal justice system, DUIs are typically treated as relatively minor offenses, especially for first-time offenders. Opponents say that deporting someone and separating them from their family for a single misdemeanor DUI is a punishment that far exceeds the crime. Second, critics point out that the bill offers no room for discretion or consideration of individual circumstances. Under H.R. 875, there's no way for an immigration judge to consider factors like how long ago the DUI occurred, whether the person has been rehabilitated, whether they have U.S. citizen family members who would suffer if they're deported, or whether deportation would cause extreme hardship. Third, opponents are concerned about retroactive application. The idea that someone could be deported for something they did 20 or 30 years ago, which wasn't a deportable offense at the time, strikes many as fundamentally unfair. Fourth, there are concerns about racial profiling and discriminatory enforcement. Studies have shown that in some jurisdictions, drivers from certain communities are disproportionately stopped by police. There's a real worry that H.R. 875 could exacerbate this problem, giving law enforcement a powerful tool to target immigrant communities. Fifth, some legal experts have raised constitutional concerns about the lack of any waiver provision or judicial discretion. Finally, opponents argue that H.R. 875 doesn't actually make anyone safer. Research has consistently shown that immigrants commit crimes at lower rates than native-born Americans. Deporting people for a single DUI doesn't address the root causes of drunk driving. So, what should you do if you're a non-citizen living in the United States? First and foremost, don't dismiss H.R. 875 as just political theater. This is a real bill with real momentum. Even if you think it's unlikely to pass, the responsible thing to do is prepare for the possibility that it could become law. Second, if you're a non-citizen, you absolutely cannot afford to drive after consuming any alcohol or using any drugs that could impair your ability to drive safely. Even if you think you're under the legal limit, even if you feel fine, the risk is simply too great. The stakes have changed. What might have been a minor legal issue in the past could now potentially cost you everything. If you're going to drink, arrange for alternative transportation, use a rideshare service, designate a sober driver, take public transportation, or stay where you are. If you have any DUI in your past, whether it's a conviction, a charge that was dismissed, or even just an arrest, you need to consult with an experienced immigration attorney as soon as possible. Don't wait until H.R. 875 becomes law. An attorney can review your specific situation, look at the details of your case, and advise you on what steps you should take to protect yourself. Immigration law is complex, and every case is different. An attorney can help you understand your options and develop a strategy. If you're a green card holder and you're eligible to apply for citizenship, this is the time to do it. U.S. citizens cannot be deported for DUI or any other criminal offense except in extremely rare cases involving fraud in obtaining citizenship. Citizenship is the ultimate protection. To be eligible for naturalization, you generally need to have been a lawful permanent resident for at least 5 years or 3 years if married to a U.S. citizen, meet certain physical presence requirements, demonstrate good moral character, and pass English and civics tests. Under current law, having a DUI can affect your ability to establish good moral character for citizenship purposes, but it's not an automatic bar. However, if H.R. 875 passes, it could make it much harder to demonstrate good moral character with a DUI on your record. So, if you're thinking about applying for citizenship, don't wait. If you're a non-citizen with any DUI history, you should be very cautious about traveling outside the United States, especially once H.R. 875 gets closer to potentially becoming law. Remember, the bill makes DUI a ground for inadmissibility, which means you could be denied re-entry when you try to come back. Even if you have a valid green card or visa, if you travel and then H.R. 875 becomes law while you're abroad, you could be stopped at the border when you return. If you must travel for an emergency, consult with an immigration attorney beforehand to understand the risks. If you're ever stopped by police or approached by immigration officers, it's crucial that you understand your rights. You have the right to remain silent. You have the right to an attorney. However, H.R. 875 specifically mentions admissions of DUI conduct. This means that if you tell an officer you had a couple of drinks or make similar statements, those admissions could potentially be used against you in immigration proceedings. Be respectful and cooperative with law enforcement, but be very careful about what you say. If you're arrested, immediately ask for an attorney and don't make any statements without legal representation. If you have a DUI in your past, gather all the documentation you can find about it. This includes court records, police reports, plea agreements, completion certificates from any programs you attended, letters of recommendation, evidence of rehabilitation, and anything else that shows what happened and what you've done since then. Immigration law can change quickly. Make sure you're staying informed about the status of H.R. 875 and other immigration legislation. Follow reliable sources of information and be wary of misinformation on social media. Subscribe to this channel where we'll continue to bring you accurate, timely information about immigration law developments. If you're in a situation where H.R. 875 could seriously affect you, it's wise to have a plan. Talk with your family about what would happen if you were detained or deported. Make sure important documents are organized and accessible. Consider giving a trusted family member or friend power of attorney so they can handle your affairs if you're unable to. If you have children, especially U.S. citizen children, make sure there's a plan for their care. This might sound extreme, but for many families, these are real and necessary preparations. To wrap up, H.R. 875 is a bill that passed the House of Representatives in June 2025 and is currently pending in the Senate Judiciary Committee. If it becomes law, it would make any DUI conviction or admission a ground for deportation and inadmissibility for all non-citizens, including green card holders. The bill has significant political momentum with White House support and bipartisan backing in the House. As we move into January 2026, there's a real possibility that the Senate could take action on this bill. The implications are profound. It would affect millions of non-citizens, including people who have lived in the United States for decades, whose only mistake was a single DUI, perhaps many years ago. If you're a non-citizen, the message is clear. Protect yourself. Never drink and drive. Consult with an immigration attorney if you have any DUI history. Consider applying for citizenship if you're eligible. Be cautious about travel. Stay informed and have a plan. This is a challenging time for immigrant communities, but knowledge is power. By understanding what HR 875 is, what it could mean, and what steps you can take, you're putting yourself in the best possible position to navigate whatever comes next. Remember, the information in this video is for educational purposes only and is not legal advice. Every immigration case is unique, and you should always consult with a qualified immigration attorney about your specific situation. If you found this video helpful, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe to US Move and Money. Hit the notification bell so you don't miss any important updates. Share this video with anyone in your community who might need this information. I'll be monitoring the status of HR 875 closely, and as soon as there are any significant developments, I'll create an update video. Stay safe, stay informed, and take care of yourselves and your families. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.